US President Donald Trump, he has said that he has ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions. This is exactly what he has said. And this is in response to warnings made by the United States, by the Russian official Dmitry Medvedev. The US President Donald Trump's decision to deploy 2 nuclear-powered submarines in what he calls appropriate areas from where they can potentially target Russia is a fairly unprecedented development. It's reminiscent of the Cold War era. Many say that this is essentially posturing, since both Russia and the US, along with its NATO allies, never really stopped underwater nuclear ballistic missile submarine patrols. But how does Trump's statement put the spotlight back on nuclear submarines once the bedrock of the defense is on the US and the former Soviet Union? We'll try and make sense of that. But listen in to what Donald Trump and Marco Rubio had to say on that.
Well, we had to do that. We just have to be careful. And a threat was made, and we didn't think it was appropriate, so I have to be very careful. So I do that on the basis of safety for our people. A threat was made by a former president of Russia, and we're going to protect our people.
Mr. Fredwehr, what I want to understand from you is how significant is Donald Trump's public declaration of deploying these nuclear submarines? How do you see it? Is this merely rhetorical posturing, or is there substance to this?
Well, I think it's got no particular substance, because these ballistic missile submarines, as you said, are constantly on patrol.
Yep.
And the whole point of them is to be in a secret location at all times, so that they can be the means of retaliation if a nuclear war starts out. And so when Donald Trump says he's moved them, nobody can possibly guess from where to where. But of course, the war of words is the thing we should focus on. And I would like to make this point, that Dmitry Medvedev, who triggered Trump, doesn't have any authority in Russia. He is the former president, and he is the deputy chair of the Security Council, but his role these days seems to be to operate a Twitter account where he puts out all sorts of provocative statements, fights the whole information war. You don't hear some of the things he says coming out of the mouths of Putin or any other Russian officials. So it's unfortunate that Trump is reacting to something Medvedev said. But secondly, from the beginning of this war, Russia has often quite publicly stressed that it is a nuclear-armed power. And it does that, I think, to deter the West, NATO in particular, from getting more involved in Ukraine. This is Russia's red line. Don't send troops or certain types of weaponry into Ukraine, because that can trigger a nuclear war. And they have been saying that often. And whenever that subject comes up, nuclear weapons, it is chilling. People do react with anxiety, and rightly so. But the only new thing here is that an American president has overtly responded to something, unfortunately, Dmitry Medvedev said.
Dr. Benkin, we have only heard stories about the Cold War, and especially me. I've only heard stories about the Cold War from my parents, from people who have lived in those times, who sort of understood what was going on at that point of time. But does this move in any way signal a return to the Cold War style nuclear signaling, or is it part of a new age hybrid deterrence strategy? What exactly is it?
Thank you very much. I suppose you're asking me that question because by my appearance, it's clear I did live during the Cold War period. However, in answer to what you said, I really don't feel this is in any way the same sort of thing we all got used to living under during the Cold War. I think my colleague was absolutely correct. We have 2 nuclear powers that could essentially destroy the world if they unleashed all of this, and neither is interested in nuclear conflict. Again, I think whether it was Secretary of State Rubio or Mr. Wary, of course, what you always want to be concerned about is miscalculation. Fortunately, during the Cold War, a lot of those miscalculations were stopped by usually individuals. However, with regards to this, I think the important thing is, well, remember, like India, the United States is a democratic nation, which means that when a president says something, he or she is not only speaking to the intended recipient, but also to a domestic political audience. During the initial phases of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, again, as Mr. Ware mentioned, quite frequently, President Putin would threaten some sort of escalation involving nuclear weapons, or remind us of Russia's substantial nuclear arsenal. And in those cases, I don't know if it was every case or almost every, I don't recall it, but primarily when he would do that, the United States under President Biden would kind of pull back a little or wouldn't do certain things. Again, I don't think it happened entirely every time, but it did happen. President Trump's reaction to Mr. Medvedev, who again, is quite right, has no formal position, although I don't think he'd be saying things that President Putin does not approve of. However, but President Trump's reaction is a clear statement that, in fact, we have a new sheriff in town. We have someone who's not going to back down from those threats. I think we could only hope that they are just threats on both sides and there won't be an escalation. But I think that's really what's important. What Trump is saying is, don't mess with me. I'm as tough as you are, or tougher, and you're not dealing with Joe Biden anymore.
But when Donald Trump, he makes such statements, when the US president makes such statements, how do public statements about nuclear force deployment impact the public perceptions, Dr. Benkin? And do they increase the risk of any sort of miscalculation or panic internationally? How do you see it?
Well, again, in theory, at least I think we could all agree that if somehow nuclear somethings are involved where they weren't involved before, a miscalculation can have greater consequences than it did in the past. I think, again, what's important, if you talk about public perceptions, I do not feel and haven't talked to anyone over here who gets a sense that we are closer to nuclear conflict with Russia. Again, I think certainly those of us who've lived through the Cold War, but also people who've only heard about it historically, know that it's not the same feeling that it was when we had nuclear armed powers at each other's throats, ready and able to engage in nuclear conflict. So no, I really believe that, especially now, certainly the American people, we've seen Donald Trump for a long time now, and we kind of have a sense of him. And just like any other sort of negotiation, this sort of brinksmanship is part of a negotiation to say to Putin, I'm not going to back down. I'm not Joe Biden.
So in fact,
and of course,
it also in fact raises another big question, and this is for Fred Weir. So how should non-aligned or regionally invested powers, especially like India, view this escalation in terms of its impact?
Well, I think they should be nervous. This is, although it's not like the Cold War, it's not. It doesn't also not. It doesn't have the systematized nature of the Cold War. We lived under that terror all those years, but there was a certain predictability and inevitability about it, and there were channels and back channels, and there was a level of stability that isn't there now. One of the things that Donald Trump did, which is greatly appreciated in Russia, is that he started diplomatic dialogue, which had virtually frozen for the last few years. There was almost no channels of communication open between Russia and the United States. Indeed, even like I live in Russia, I can't send a letter to the United States because post offices don't communicate. It has gotten that bad, and Donald Trump started to reverse that. But yes, this is a situation that I think at root Donald Trump is frustrated with his inability to prevail upon Putin to make peace in Ukraine. Putin has clearly told him that he's not compromising with Russian war objectives. I think in the last telephone conversation, and that's what all this stems from.
Mr. Weir, more importantly, with nuclear submarines suddenly back in the headlines, we don't know. Are we entering a new era of visible nuclear brinkmanship, unlike the relative quiet of the post-Cold War years? We'll have to wait and watch. Thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this discussion.